Hey there, friends. This is the Business Accelerator building in Portland State University. I show it because there's this Octet Trust that relates to the curriculum that I promulgate at the School of Tomorrow. And this is where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the School of Tomorrow. Now, where is that, you ask? Well, I always just say the Silicon Forest because it's more of a meme than it is a physical building. It's not that Business Accelerator building, although I have been in there and done some classes and stuff. What we're talking about here is more like economics. Let me make this a little bit more visible on one screen. This looks like economics, right? Did you learn about opportunity cost when you were in college? Perhaps you did. And so this picture is, if your horizon of opportunity is fairly constrained because you're living in a dark age and you don't have technology, then that Malthusian nightmare of there's just not enough to go around and we're in this struggle for limited resources. I mean, yes, resources are limited, of course, but as you move out and expand your horizon of opportunity as your intelligence improves, you realize it's not as dire a situation as you thought. Like right now, we have 8 to 9 billion people on the planet, and in principle, they could all be eating. Like, it's not the lack of food that is behind the imbalance in living standards that we experience. But the imbalance in living standards does fuel resentment, war, hostility, and so on. And some people think it's because, in principle, there can only be a few winners, right? Only those, if you want to have a two-car garage and a jet ski and everything, there's this feeling, well, not everyone in China can have that. So we've got to fight for our way of life and things like this. There's a lot of Malthusian mindsets out there. Now, the reason I've put the Pentagon in both places is because the struggle among mindsets is in the military as much as outside the military. Now, when your horizon is bigger, then you can head out in the direction of relative utopia. You see that possibility because of your higher intelligence. You're in the outer ring of opportunity cost. This means that you could have super duper weapons too, like with better technology, better physics, better understanding, whatever, however you want to define an increased horizon of opportunity. You could ride that arrow out in the direction of hyper weapons and stuff. You could. But would you? Like, if you're a smart species and you know that you could make it and have relative utopia, if you're on this outer ring, would you really want to go in that direction? I think we're going in that direction, or a lot of us are, because we're still too low on our horizon of opportunity. We don't have the intelligence. This is Planet of the Apes where we're at. And therefore, our blue arrow is towards oblivion. And, this opportunity cost where we could be, if our horizon of opportunity would expand, where we could be heading is in direction of relative utopia. Now, I put elephants there to stand for like wildlife. It's not like I'm just trying to say Republicans or Democrats or something like that. This is not really focused on just specifically US politics. I'm using memes and symbols and icons to try to communicate my meaning without being particularly nationalistic or parochial, although I can't help it. It is in English and it does reflect, my choice of icons at the time. I've had this going since 87, right? This is ancient by now. But I've been using it and wanted to share it again because I've been using it, because it does inform my thinking. And, when I talk as School of Tomorrow guy, people are like, well, where are you coming from? What are you thinking? What is your thought? And for me, it's like LAWCAP. Where do I get that? You see here on the screen that I'm talking about. Lawyer capitalism, this rules-based world order we hear about, you could say. And then I say USAOS militates against this kind of waste. So this Pentagon over here and this kind of trying to move the arrow down and head out towards relative utopia through an expanding horizon here, That to me is what the USA is all about. And that's partly why I've taken the position I've taken, say, on Nord Stream, which is I'm saying the USA could not have done it. By definition, it can't be the USA. It doesn't matter who, in a personal sense, organized this thing. It cannot be a great nation that did that. So whoever did it, even if they think they did it on behalf of a great nation, they're not acting in the interests of the USA. At this point, you have to draw the line at some point and say, they were acting on their own recognizance, whoever they were, right? It was not with USA support, because I'm getting to say, for me, it's the USA operating system, and it's something I've been working on for 20 years or whatever. So it's like my USA had nothing to do with Nord Stream. Now, I don't know about yours. Maybe I don't even care about yours, right? So I'm kind of combative, kind of polemical, you could say. And then there's a bunch of links here, and GST is general systems theory. And again, I've been pushing this GST versus standard econ for a long time. So I'm entrenched, you could say, in this worldview. That's partly what's fun about having a worldview. If you can get entrenched in it, then you can test it, see if it falls apart, see where it takes you. So, how do we get to that outer horizon of responsibility and intelligence? In other words, how do we move out to this expanded horizon of opportunity? And here's where I pick up on, wouldn't it be interesting to revisit our rationality and think differently about a number of topics? And here I pick up on a futurist many of you will have heard of, especially if you have tuned in this channel, because I've already done hundreds of videos on this topic. But the late R. Buckminster Fuller and his futurism is representative of a whole bunch of thinkers. Like, he's not the only one. At this point, I'll go to Wikipedia. Let's see, not Wiki Educator. Well, let's go to Wiki Educator. I'll do a little more about the School of Tomorrow, right? So in the School of Tomorrow, Wiki Educator runs on the same engine that powers Wikipedia, but it's not Wikipedia, but it looks a little similar, you're thinking probably, because it is a little similar. So I've got this whole heuristics for teachers. I think I don't want to undermine teachers by going straight to their students, although that will happen. It's like the teachers can come along with me and see this more futuristic approach to teaching, right? Not just teaching style and technology, but also content. And there's Oregon Curriculum Network and like that. And really, this business plan building, the reason I include it is because of the fact that when you pack spheres together, you don't get the XYZ coordinate system. I'm talking as tightly as possible. I'm talking giving you a bag of marbles all precisely the same diameter, which they aren't sometimes. When I used to go into the schools sometimes and teach this stuff, I requisitioned bags of marbles from the public school inventory, and they gave them to me, but they were not equidiameter, so it was a little bit frustrating. But if you have equidiameter marbles and you pack them together, you get a certain packing arrangement that is consistent with the space frame. And this will take us back to Alexander Graham Bell, and we can weave in a lot of American history here. And once you've got that space frame, you see it's got tetrahedral and octahedral voids. You may not see that. Let me take another look from another point of view. And by the way, Pascal's triangle fits into all this, because when you start packing together balls, you're going to end up with what are called triangular and then tetrahedral numbers. So let me show you that, which you can then show on the screen using ray tracing or a real engine like Unreal or Unity or one of those engines, or Blender, which you can program in Python. So here, figure it numbers, these appear in Pascal's triangle. See, I was showing you a way to generate Pascal's triangle in Python. We'll forget the details there, but look at this column, 1, 3, 6, 10, and it keeps going, right? And if you keep going and going, then like the row starts to turn into this nice bell curve. In other words, it goes low and then up 10, 10, and then down 5, 1. If you keep making more rows, finally it gets to look like by row 20 more like this, and you get more of a bell curve like that. And then I show you random numbers designed, they're not really random, pseudo-random numbers in a bell curve shape, and I relate the Pascal's triangle to the bell curve and all this kind of stuff. So, focal points, going back to my blog, going back to 2006, there's Pascal's triangle. Now we want to relate it to what I call the concentric hierarchy, which is what Bucky Fuller also relates it to. And let's go to generating the flextegrity lattice. It's a way of arranging all our polyhedrons, the simplest ones at first. You could say the platonics, but we make sure the rhombic dodecahedron is just as important as the pentagonal, if not more so, right? So it's a way of presenting geometric concepts. That's the so-called rhombic dodecahedron right there, so that they make you smarter. Like the approach to spatial geometry here, there's that same octet truss. Bigger now, maybe you can see. So octahedral voids and tetrahedral voids in ratio 4:1. In other words, the octahedrons versus the tetrahedrons have volume 4. We don't usually teach that though, because once your cube is unit volume, your octahedron, your tetrahedron like that, all the other polyhedrons tend to be irrationally volumed, and we don't really care about their ratios one to the other because we're not really nesting them one inside the other. The Russian doll approach, matryoshka, whatever it's called. We don't usually teach it that way because they're all irrationally volumed except for the cube, and so who cares? And isn't nesting one inside the other kind of, it looks kind of hocus pocus, doesn't it? We don't like to nest them because that means it's got to mean something. Like here, I'm nesting them, right? Now, there's old Western civilization, whole tradition, whole lineage going through Kepler and so on, where we do more of this kind of nesting like this. But it's out of favor, really, with the PhDs these days because they call it numerology. They think it's like mystical to be nesting polyhedrons one inside the other. Hey, there's one bouncing up and down, moving and stuff. I use Jupyter Notebook to do all this. So I'd say we're kind of in a dark age right now. That's what I was talking about in terms of how come we're having this big war and everything. And I would say going back to GST, because our approach to basic education and our understanding of even basic geometry, we're kind of resisting getting smarter in that direction, even though a way has been shown, I feel. And that's why I enjoy working for my School of Tomorrow in a sense, because I can capitalize on work that's already been done. I don't feel like I have to do it all from scratch. So once you start stacking up the triangular numbers, you get the tetrahedral numbers. And that's showing off in the next column over of our Pascal's triangle 1, 4, 10. Now I can continue with that. In fact, this is interactive here. We don't use calculators, right? This isn't Texas Instruments. This isn't a dark age. This is where Americans, now again, I'm starting to sound parochial, but people with the means to do so have decided to mature and actually use the tools at their disposal and not deliberately dumb themselves down too much, right? So let's see, how can I make this? 15 is a bit too high a number to fit on the screen easily. So here's our tetrahedral numbers. 1, 4, it's cumulative, total number of balls in a tetrahedron. 1, then add the 2 layers, 4, then add 6 under that, 10. Then add the next triangular number and the next triangular number. As you accumulate that way, you're seeing it in the column here, 1, 4, 10, 20, 35, so forth. So we use Pascal's triangle to get you thinking in terms of this kind of lattice I'm showing at the top, because when you pack spheres, see, it's going to make the same pattern, just like I was showing you, right? These are spheres packing to fill space. Now we've got them spread out here so you can see the separate triangles. But ultimately we're building a packing that looks like this. You can start with the nuclear sphere and pack outwards layer by layer, right? And you get a cube octahedron, this is what it's called. And we have a rational whole number volume for that. The 12 balls around one is our volume 20. But that's because our four sphere tetrahedron is volume one, right? We have this whole math behind that. And I think what's really defining of our age, I'm going to say what history is going to look back on about the last 50 years, I think, is how little people cared about any of this. Like, oh wow, we could be changing our attitude about, polyhedrons, which I take as symbolic of rationality itself. In a way, it's like thinking itself, right? And I think what thinking is now being challenged with is artificial intelligence, which if like we're not going to move up this curve, we're not going to expand our horizon. It's going to be like that Stephen King novel. What's it called about the things that eat the past and just you can't stay in the past. Eventually, these creatures just come along and munch you up. And I think AI is coming along to like push us outwards a little bit because if we stay as we are, we're just going to get eaten by AI, which is fine with me, really. I mean, if we can't fulfill our destiny as a smart species, I think the appropriate thing is to be consumed by our machines somehow and spit out. But, it's not too late. That's a good science fiction story, by the way, what I just told. It's not too late to improve our thinking. We just have to get over our superstitions about superstition, you could say. It's like there's nothing wrong with nesting polyhedron. I did it here in Blender. And you can see like that green cube, which you can barely see, it has volume 3. The rhombic dodecahedron, which is blue, has volume 6 exactly. And it's a space filler. It's like, what if we had a civilization where we actually let kids know all this? Something other than the abuse of not letting them know, right? Pretty serious abuse to not even let kids in on this, that they had this opportunity. Even if we decided to blow it and not go for relative utopia, how many kids even know we had a choice? So there's more rhetoric for you. If you want to jump into this conspiracy, quote unquote, Marshall McLuhan, when he met Bucky Fuller, said, I've read your books and I'm ready to join your conspiracy. So he has some interest in fighting on the side of the United States going forward, then by all means, jump in. The water's fine. Looking forward. Talk to you soon.